How's it going, my fellow shiny Pokemon? Shiny here, bringing you guys a Pokemon Showdown and new fight. So let's get started. And if you want to know about my team, in the description, it'll give you a link to the team preview of my team. So let's get started. Opponent brings out Swellow, and I lead off my Kangaskhan. Opponent goes for Protect, and I go for a Fake Out. And opponent's Toxic Orb activates, and I go for a Sucker Punch, predicting an offensive move. And opponent goes for a Brave Bird, and somehow I survive. And the recoil almost kills it, but the Toxic finishes it off. Opponent brings out a Swalk, and opponent switches out into its Gunting, predicting my Sucker Punch, I bet. Opponent goes for a Sucker Punch and takes out my Kangaskhan, and my Kangaskhan goes down. I bring out my Gabite, and opponent switches out into its Miltank. I go for an Earthquake. Miltank takes the hit amazingly, and Miltank sets up its Stealth Rocks, and I get a Toxic off. Opponent goes for a Body Slam on me, and gets hit from Ruskin, but I get paralyzed and I can't move. Opponent switches out into its Wartortle, and I set up my Stealth Rocks. And opponent goes for an Ice Beam, get a critical hit. I think the critical hit mattered, but whatever. My Gabite went down anyways. I bring on my Electros. Opponent switches out into its Miltank, and I predicted the switch, so I went for a Drain Punch. Opponent brings out its Swalk and goes for close combat and brings me down to about half. I go for a Drain Punch, almost kill it, but lives with 6%. I want my Electros to stay alive for a bit, so I switch out to my Musharuna. Opponent goes for a close combat, not doing that much, and the opponent switches out into its Gunking, predicting a Psychic, but however, I go for a Thunder Wave, predicting that. Opponent's paralyzed and cannot move, and I switch out into my Electros. Opponent definitely went for a Pursuit, and he's going to be saying that in the chat. Opponent goes for a Second Punch on my Electros, almost killing it, but I go for a Drain Punch, but I don't kill it. I switch out Electros, predicting a Sucker Punch, so I bring on my Artillery, but it doesn't matter. Skunk Tank is paralyzed. Opponent goes for a Sucker Punch, gets a critical hit. I think the critical hit mattered, and takes out my Artillery. I bring on my Electros. Opponent is paralyzed and cannot move, and I go for a Thunder Punch. Damn. Opponent definitely wanted to go for a Sucker Punch, and opponent brings out Swalk as Death Fodder from the rocks, and opponent brings out its Electabuzz. I switch out to my Musharuna, predicting a special attack, and opponent goes for a Thunderbolt and paralyzes my Musharuna. Opponent goes for another Thunderbolt and takes out my Musharuna, and I bring out my Electros as a Death Fodder, and I go down from the Stealth Rocks. I bring out my Jinx, and this is where I make my comeback. I go for a Psychic, get a critical hit, and I wish I had badass music. Opponent brings out its Wartortle. I go for a Psychic, bring him down to about half, and opponent goes for a Toxic on my Jinx, and opponent goes for Protect, try and stall the Toxic, and I go for another, and I keep going for Psychic. Opponent doesn't go for Protect, and I go for a Psychic, almost taking it out. Opponent goes for a Scald, healing me up with my Dry Skin, and opponent goes for another Protect. I go for a Psychic, and I am hurt, and opponent is doing a lot, Toxic doing a lot of damage. Opponent goes for another Protect, and I go for a Psychic, and I barely survive the Toxic damage, and opponent protects, but it fails, and I go for a Psychic and take out the Wartortle. That was an amazing match. Alright, so the question of the video is that which would you rather have, Toxic or Paralysis? And can we have 5 likes for the video? Alright, so comment, like, and subscribe to become Shiny Pokemon, and I'll see you next time.